We are live with Whitney Morgan, and she's licensed acupuncturist and functional medicine practitioner. And I can't wait starting talking to her. Hello, everyone. Another Friday and another Green Healing Show. I actually found Whitney Morgan in her own topic about the wheat zoomer, right?
Mhm.
And how actually gluten-free diet can help us um, be better. I'm not saying that be healed because there are lots of healing opportunities in our
Mhm.
body that we have to find. Welcome to my show with me.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited.
Me too. So, first of all, I'm very excited because you have both two certificates that I love. One of them is acupuncturist, and you are also functional medicine practitioner. I know the holistic medicine always encourage us to go and find functional medicine.
Mhm.
And I just want to know what's the, first of all, tell me about yourself. And then let me know how you found you found functional medicine and why acupuncture.
Sure. Well, really it was because of my own health journey. And I never intended to go into alternative health as a profession, but starting in 1997, that's when I started getting diagnosed with different autoimmune diseases. Over a decade, actually, I collected about 4 autoimmune diseases, and I came from a very traditional medical family. Practically everyone in my family is some sort of medical practitioner. So I always walked that path and went to different specialist after specialist and did all the things, but wound up realizing that conventional medicine didn't really have anything for me. There were no answers, and more than that, my doctors weren't even asking the question of, okay, well, why do you have this? It was more like, well, we don't really know, genetics. People just like I had just drawn the short straw or something. It was just bad luck. Um, and I didn't get much support when I talked to doctors about, is there anything I can do with my diet or any changes I can make? They just didn't really have answers or direction for me. And one particular doctor said something to me that really just shocked me out of that whole paradigm. He said, "This isn't going to kill you, but you'll die with it. It's going to get worse. We can try and manage the pain, but there's nothing that can be done. You should join a support group." So when he said that, that was it for me. I don't know why. It was just that was the catalyst moment for me where I just rejected the path that I was on and said, no, there has to be something different. I refuse that vision of my future. I can't live that way, thinking that that's what my life is going to be like. And I was in my 40s. So that's when I started exploring alternative health, naturopathy, doing a lot of research around nutrition. And then I started receiving acupuncture at a local acupuncture school in their student clinic. And I came to love the medicine so much, I decided, okay, I want to do this. So that was my first foray into functional medicine, because I really do believe that acupuncture is one of the original functional medicines. They're very focused on root cause and on coaching up health and vitality, and very much believe that disease doesn't just happen, right? I mean, certain things have to be in place that make us vulnerable to disease, and we can correct all of those things. So it really spoke to me on so many levels, and I reaped such benefit from receiving it that that's what I decided I wanted to do with my life. And when I graduated from acupuncture school, I felt like I needed something to complement this very strong Eastern medicine philosophy that I had. And that's when I found functional medicine. And really they are two sides of the same coin. One's Western, one's Eastern, but they're just different languages saying the same thing. So I felt that it was a real compliment.
Whitney, I guess the difference between functional medicine and acupuncture is that in functional medicine, you have more access to inside the body
Sure.
because you do a lot of labs, right? And
Yes.
they are real, right? Because you can exactly see the result, and
Hmm.
these results are not found in conventional medicine
Right.
because we don't do a lot of labs in conventionals. They are very limited, and the problem is they just try to heal the symptoms, as you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
But in functional medicine, we just try to find the hidden layer
Yeah.
um, apart from those symptoms. Um, the thing is about the actual acupuncture. It's so fascinating because those days we didn't have any labs, right? We didn't have
Right.
any blood tests, anything. Even without them, they could actually cure or see a lot of healing opportunities in the body.
Right. Right.
So how um, how do you integrate these two together?
Sure. Well, you're right that Chinese medicine, ancient Chinese doctors, they didn't have access to the same types of data that we rely on as modern functional medicine practitioners. But there is something very, very precise in terms of their diagnostic skills, the pulse, the tongue, um, the eyes, the skin tone, the way a person smells. I mean, there's so many different things that a Chinese medicine doctor is looking at that's right in front of them, right? And they are gathering information. In a way, they're testing, they're getting data from the body, but just in a different way that we're used to in a modern functional sense, right? So but it's amazing how accurate in terms of diagnostics they can be, relying on things like tongue and pulse. And to our modern sensibilities, that seems almost fantastical, but it is quite accurate. So I do see them as just similar, but coming from a different perspective, but they're doing the same things. They're both forms of medicine are looking for the root causes, those underlying imbalances within the body, not just physical but also energetic. And then once we clear those imbalances, well, then the body does what it knows how to do, right? It heals. We don't really have to heal anything. We just have to remove the things that are standing in the way. So as a modern functional practitioner, I'm doing the same thing that ancient Chinese doctors were doing 1,000 years ago. Just we have different tools.
Yes, exactly. As you said, um, by even looking at somebody with the tongues and
Mhm.
paws, it's so amazing that you can actually see, and you can actually see the result of the lab for the functional medicine and see, wow, that's why you have these results. And I
Mhm.
see even PTSD and having a lot of mental issues and traumas can also affect our health.
Yes.
And that's why acupuncture really helps because if it's a good acupuncturist, they
Mhm.
always ask you about your traumas, your mental problem, your
Yeah.
burden, whatever stressors that we have at
Right.
work, at home, So that's a great integration when
Mhm.
you, because it's not only papers, as you said, it's just we try to find other healing opportunities, and it's not about the healing only. We try
Right.
to remove the blockers.
Exactly.
Yeah. So just go back to the diet best
Mhm.
diet for Hashimoto's. We actually chose the topic Hashimoto's become more specific, but we can actually generalize it in um, other disease and especially for autoimmune disease.
Absolutely.
Um, you talk about wheat
Mhm.
and gluten. Why
Right.
gluten-free diet is good for autoimmune disease?
Sure. Well, gluten is probably, from a nutritional standpoint, it's probably the biggest health hazard we have right now. Um, and one of the reasons is because it's very hard to digest. I mean, no one can completely digest gluten. Doesn't matter whether you're sensitive or not. But the other problem is that gluten causes a leaky gut in everyone, regardless of whether or not you're sensitive. So when gluten enters in the gut environment, it raises an enzyme called zonulin, and zonulin actually opens up what are called these tight junctions. It opens up these little holes, basically, between the cells in the gut. And when that happens, things that shouldn't get into the bloodstream can now get into the bloodstream. And then that's when it causes a problem for our immune system. And most functional practitioners agree that one of the origin points of all autoimmune disease, no matter where the disease is located, is the presence of a leaky gut. So you really can't have autoimmunity unless there's some sort of like rare genetic issue, but you do have to have a leaky gut in order to progress to the place of having an autoimmune disease. And gluten is just the number one perpetrator of a leaky gut.
So, do we have to go exactly completely free from gluten, or how can we replace
Yeah,
this? Because I know that a lot of, like, in wheat bread we have gluten,
right.
and I'm not talking about the sugar, because everybody, you can be sugar free somehow. So what is, like, let's say in a breakfast, you just have some example for breakfast. How can we have a complete breakfast
hmm
without gluten?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we're, from an evolutionary standpoint, we're really not wired to eat a lot of grains, but we do in our modern diet, but we don't necessarily need them. They're not particularly nutrient dense. So we having a diet that is driven by grains, gluten being the primary one, does lead to a lot of nutrient deficiencies. So we've come to rely on grains and wheat in particular as if it's like a nutritious part of a healthy breakfast, but it's really not. Um, but if you're conditioned to say, you like your toast or you like your pancakes or think those breakfasty foods, well, you can make all of those things gluten free. You can make them with alternative grains if you want to, rice, flour, amaranth, coconut, things like that. But you can also make those things without grains at all by using a combination of almond and tapioca and coconut flours. And so you can satisfy that need of those typical breakfasty foods without the gluten and even without grains. Uh, but there is no such thing as being mostly gluten free. It doesn't work that way because gluten is one of the only foods that the immune system makes memory B cells to, which means that it remembers it forever. So once you're gluten sensitive, you're always gluten sensitive. And it doesn't matter how much you heal and seal your gut, you can never reintroduce it without provoking an immune response. And the problem with having a little gluten every now and then is that gluten sets off an inflammatory cascade in the body that can last for up to 6 months. So, you have gluten at Christmas and gluten on your birthday. I mean, you could be inflamed for the entire year.
Yeah, it's so dangerous, I know, but sometimes it's not easy to
No,
avoid.
it's not, but it's particularly problematic for women with thyroid issues because there is a part of gluten, the gluten protein, that looks like thyroid tissue. It's called molecular mimicry. So
Mm-hmm.
when it gets through the gut lining and it gets into the bloodstream, the immune system sees that and, tags it, but then it looks at your thyroid and it says, "Oh, that looks an awful lot like gluten, the bad guy. I'm going to have to go after that too." So it starts destroying your thyroid tissue, thinking it's going after gluten. So that's one way that gluten is just bad for thyroid. The other thing is that the lectin inside of gluten, lectins, all plants have lectins, but grains are pretty high in them. It's called wheat germ agglutinin. That's the lectin of the wheat plant. That actually travels to the thyroid and docks into cell receptors on the thyroid gland. And then the immune system sees that it's there and knows it doesn't belong there. And it tries to attack the lectin, and because it's attached to the thyroid tissue gets destroyed in the process. So you have autoimmunity by collateral damage. So there are two ways that gluten causes thyroid autoimmunity. So any woman with a Hashimoto's diagnosis should be 100% gluten free for the rest of her life. That's just, there's no other way to thread that needle.
Yeah. So, what's this difference between Hashimoto's and just thyroid issue? I know thyroid has a lot of,
Yeah,
branches.
sure. Well, Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease, and it results in an underactive thyroid, low thyroid hormone levels in the body. It's different than a non-autoimmune low thyroid, which we call hypothyroidism. Now, hypothyroidism can be the result of nutrient deficiencies. There are certain nutrients you need in order to make thyroid hormone, right? It can also result from chronic stress. If the adrenal system, your stress response system, is too stressed over a long period of time, that will downregulate thyroid hormone production and lead to hypothyroidism. Those are the two probably most common causes of just your basic hypothyroidism: nutrient deficiencies and chronic stress. Um, However, research suggests that the majority of hypothyroid cases out there are actually undiagnosed Hashimoto's. So just because a woman's been diagnosed with hypothyroidism doesn't mean she doesn't have Hashimoto's. It means that maybe her doctor hasn't looked for elevated thyroid antibodies, so she never got the diagnosis. So I always operate from kind of a conservative standpoint, where any woman who comes to me with hypothyroidism, I look at her as if she has Hashimoto's. I'm still investigating some of those same root causes that I know are so common in Hashimoto's. And 9 times out of 10, we find some of them.
That's interesting. That's why
Yeah.
we do, holistic, I mean, labs.
Hmm.
So you just don't um, rely on conventional labs because it doesn't give you the right result for the thyroid.
Right. Yeah, particularly when it comes to thyroid, because the reference ranges for conventional labs are very wide. So women can actually feel pretty bad and have all the classic low thyroid symptoms, but they still look quote unquote normal on paper because they fall within those really wide reference ranges. But in the functional medicine world, we use much narrower reference ranges because those represent optimal health, optimal thyroid function.
Whitney, how we can help pregnant women or people who are trying to get pregnant with these thyroid and Hashimoto's. Let's say they just realize that they discover that they have Hashimoto or they
Mhm.
have thyroid inside their pregnancy.
Okay.
Can should do they have to completely ignore gluten and
Yeah.
go gluten free even during the pregnancy? Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, and part of the reason for that is because, infertility and miscarriages are also one of the complications of an unmanaged gluten sensitivity. So, I'm not saying that everyone who has a miscarriage or has trouble conceiving has a gluten sensitivity. It's just that gluten sensitivity and celiac disease in particular can result in difficulties with fertility and carrying a child to term. So yeah, your best bet is to go gluten free. And anyone with Hashimoto's, if they don't go gluten free, the autoimmune progression, the destruction of the thyroid tissue is going to continue. So there will be no getting better, right? It doesn't matter how often your doctor raises your thyroid medication dosage. That doesn't fix the underlying tissue destruction that's occurring, right? So if you want to stop that tissue destruction, you have to stop one of the main triggers, which is gluten. The other thing to think about as a pregnant woman is that in the third trimester, you share your immune system information with the child in the womb, right? They get your immune system basically. So anything that you have a lot of elevated antibodies to, whether it's gluten or dairy or corn or your thyroid or your neurological tissue, all that information kind of gets encoded in the fetus. So we really want to transmit the best, healthiest information possible, right?
Yes. All right. You have the website morgannutrition.com,
Yes.
and you also have Instagram. The same thing. That's great.
Yeah,
Whitney
Whitney Morgan
Morgan. Yeah,
Nutrition.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Same,
Facebook,
same.
Instagram. Yeah.
So it's easy to find you because
Yeah.
it's from your first and last name. What do you have in your website and your Facebook, your Instagram?
Sure. So, if folks are interested in getting some free resources, like women with Hashimoto's, if they go to my website or even hypothyroidism, one thing that's really popular right now is I have a thyroid lab test interpretation guide, which teaches you about the different things that should be on a thyroid test. You know, all the different markers that you can run on a thyroid lab, what they mean, what they tell you. And it also teaches women how to identify possibly some of their underlying triggers for Hashimoto's just based on their thyroid lab. And it gives them strategies for things that they can do from a dietary standpoint and maybe testing that they need, further testing they need to get done in order to really identify their root causes. So that's free on my website. That's pretty popular. And then I do have some other resources specifically about gluten, what to do if you accidentally get contaminated with gluten, what you should do for the next 3 to 5 days to speed up healing and recover. So there are a few gluten resources there that I think people might find valuable.
Thank you so much. Do
Mhm.
you have any event or anything coming soon, or do you want to talk about something specific?
Yeah, it's coming soon, probably sometime in March. A colleague of mine who's also a thyroid coach and I are planning on launching a free private group for women with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. It's not going to be your typical Facebook group. It's going to be probably on Mighty Networks or something like that, where we will offer consistent support, consistent coaching support, live Q&As. So for women who might not be in a position where they can invest in private coaching with someone like me, they can at least get some contact and assistance from qualified coaches in our free group. So we don't know what it's going to be called yet. We're still kind of brainstorming. Um, but if you're interested, if anyone listening is interested, get on my website, download a free resource that'll put you on my mailing list, and you'll get updated as we create this free group. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a great resource for women who just can't afford the private coaching that they need right now.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed talking to you, especially when you talk about acupuncture and functional medicine, how we can integrate them and
Mhm.
how we can, I'm not saying healing, but you can feel better even
Yeah.
if you have Hashimoto and gluten free. We talk about the diet, how it can help us remove a lot of blockers in our body. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Please subscribe to Pontal Calhoun Transition channel to get the latest interviews and order my book PTSD Compass through Amazon. How to confront PTSD and navigate trauma to triumph.